What the hell is Sauce Sports or whatever that last call
I
was
don't
talking about?
know.
What the hell is that?
Guys
That was
are
weird.
from Free Love, man.
What's good, Sauce Nation? It's Toxic City Tinney. Now, as usual, I would like to address a different flavor that usually gets little to no love, if at all. Now, you may be wondering what I'm talking about, and I may not be making any sense, but as you've seen from the general, as you've seen from Positive Points, Toxic City Tinney, I have to adjust the mood for this. Now, I'm going to ask you one simple favor. Let's turn down the lights and add some bass, because it's time we get our stats sexual on. So get your clipboards and your nipple clamps ready for this flavor ride, baby. Let's start off with Houston's offensive rankings. Now, through 2 games, it's kind of hard to say what the offensive rankings will be for an entire season. So these will change, ladies and gentlemen. But let's start off with the Houston Texans offense. Right now, we're ranked 16th with 20.5 points per game. Man, that just does something to you in the nether region, doesn't it, baby? Let's move on to yards per game. 338.5 yards for a ranking of 21st. Not the best and not even halfway. But let me tell you something that's halfway. Next up, we're going to have passing yards per game with a meager 185.5 yards, ranked 24th. Well, Deshaun, we're going to need you to get that up, baby. Moving right on to rushing yards per game. And let me tell you something, fellas. If your ladies in the room, it's about to get very wet. And I'm telling you, it's not Emilda's fault. Because right now, rushing yards per game is 153 yards. Good for a rank of 5th in the league overall. Now, moving on, let's speak on this defensive ranks. Now, if she was wet after that one, she might dry up after this. Points per game allowed by the Houston Texans defense are 21 per game, good for 16. Just underneath half. Yards per game, 395.5. Now we're back into the 20s, good for a rank of 23rd. Defensive passing yards allowed per game, good for a rank of 26, 270 per game. Now, defensive rush yards per game is going to let you down again. It's like taking a cold shower when you're all hot and ready. We are giving up 125.5 yards on the ground, and it's good for a rank of 23rd. Now you may be saying, Toxic City Tinney, it cannot be this bad for just Houston. Of course, the lowly LA Chargers, with that nasty ass fan base, can't be doing much better. And as far as I see it, they aren't doing much better. Let's go ahead and start off on that stat sheet. LA's points per game is 18th, and they're scoring 20 points per game through 2 games. Yards per game is 4th at 429.5. Men, I'm telling you right now, if your ladies love the stats, get her out the room, because that's going to get her hot and bothered for the wrong team. Passing yards per game, yet again, it's pretty good. This old man Rivers, he knows how to swing it, and I'm telling you, he ain't got 9 kids for no reason. He's passing for 298.5 yards per game, good enough for a rank 8th. Now, rushing yards per game. This is where the Texans got them. This is where they're going to have to show them what that long stroke is about. LA's only good for a rank 10th for 131 yards per game through 2 games. Let's move on to that lowly LA defense. Now, LA defenses, they're giving up 12th best defense right now, points per game, 18.5. Just a few more points than we do, or a few points less than we do if we're going to be exact. Now the yards per game, they're ranked 17th, and you're looking at 357.5 per game. That's how much LA's defense is giving up to opposing offenses, which bodes well for the young man at QB who just aged 1 year older. I'm telling you, lock your ladies up, because if they're listening to this right now, they're sliding right out that recliner. Next will be defensive rushing yards per game. Now they are ranked 28th in the league through 2 games, allowing a very robust 148.5 yards a game. This is well within the regions of Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson. So I'm going to tell you right now, come Sunday, just run that ball, baby. I know this may be getting a few people the chills, the heart-thumping pride in your Houston Texans, because we all know our stack sexuals use the stats to boast and keep hope alive. And I do have a few more points that I do want to share with you. And going forward, let's speak about Rivers and company through 2 weeks. Well, as far as Rivers goes, in week 1, he completed 25 of 34 passes for 333 yards, 3 TDs, and 1 INT. Then you got Eckler backing him up on the ground with 58 yards on the ground, 1 TD. And let's not forget about Jackson that was backing him up, 57 yards on the ground. All this was made possible by Allen, Eckler, and Henry, each one posting great receiving numbers. Allen had 123 yards and 1 TD on their first week. Eckler had 96 yards and 2 TDs passing, or receiving, I may say. Then you had Hunter Henry backing him up with 60 yards to move him down the field. And in that first game, their defense was able to rack up 2 sacks, and they ended up getting the win over Indianapolis. Week 2, things didn't go so well for the LA Chargers. Now, let me be honest and tell you something right here. When I read these stats, you may be shocked. Rivers went 21 of 36 for 293 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Eckler had 66 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground. Jackson had 59 yards on the ground to assist and helping keep that rush game alive. Allen assisted with 98 yards receiving. Williams also assisted with 83 yards receiving. Eckler, once again, helped out in that receiving game, 67 yards. But LA's defense ended up getting no sacks and 0 INTs. Now you may be wondering, how does this compare to the Houston Texans? And I do have that information for you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start off with the poultry example that they gave us week 1 against the Saints. The defense got 1 interception and 1 sack. Now, as for Watson and company, the offense, they were how you say, spectacular. The kind of vision that you see when your woman opens up the shower door and she's standing there as the water drips off of her. Watson went 20 for 30 for 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 INT. Hyde had 83 yards on the ground, and Johnson had 57 on the ground. Hop ended up getting 111 yards through the air and 2 touchdowns for a pass. Fuller ended up having 69 yards through the air, and Stills backed him up with 37 yards, but what most importantly counted for that game was that one TD that he caught. And we can't forget about Watson's ability to rush this ball in for a touchdown. Unfortunately, through all their heroics, it was not enough to take down the Saints. Following up with a Week 2 against our divisional rival, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Watson went 16 for 29, 159 yards, and 0 TDs and 0 INTs. He also had one rushing touchdown, and we'll get to that shortly. Hyde, once again with an impressive showing, absolutely long stroking it on the Jacksonville Jags. He laid down 90 yards on the ground. Johnson also laid down 31 yards to assist to push our average up. Hop and Fuller both combined for 40 yards through the air each. Stills wasn't far behind with 38 yards through the air. Now, we did make it out of that game with the win, and most importantly, it came off the legs of our Houston Texans quarterback number 1, Deshaun Watson. Well, Sauce Nation, Stat Sexuals, I hope that was as good for you as it was for me. This is Toxic City Tinney, and I'll see y'all in the comments.
Perfect.